Oh, shit! Droft scrambled up, kicking embers over Beck's cloak and making him gasp and slap 'em off. A right commotion had flared up, folk stomping, metal hissing, grunts and curses in the darkness. There was some sort of a fight, and Beck had no idea who'd started it, or why, or what side he was supposed to be on. But Craw's dozen were all piling in, so he just went with the current, drew his father's sword, and stood shoulder to shoulder with the rest, Wonderful on his left, with her curved blade steady, Droft on his right, with a hatchet in his fist and his tongue stuck out between his teeth. Wasn't so difficult to do, what with everyone else doing it. Would have been damn near impossible not to, in fact. Brodd Tenways and some of his boys were facing 'em across a wind-blown fire, and he had a lot of blood on his rashy face, and maybe a broken nose, too. Might be that Calder had been the one to do it, given how he'd come stomping past like that, and now was standing next to Craw with sword in hand and smirk on face. Still, the whys didn't seem too important right then. It was the what nexts that were looming large on everyone's minds. "Put 'em away." Craw spoke slow, but there was a kind of iron to his voice, said he'd be backing down from nothing. It put iron in Beck's bones, made him feel like he'd be backing down from nothing neither. Tenways didn't look like taking any backward steps himself, though. "You fucking put 'em away!" And he spat blood into the fire. Beck found his eyes had caught a lad's on the other side, maybe a year or two older than him. Yellow-haired lad with a scar on one cheek. They turned a little to face each other. As if on an instinct, they were all pairing off with the partner who suited 'em best, like folk at a harvest dance, except this dance seemed likely to shed a lot of blood. "Put 'em up," growled Craw, and his voice had more iron now. A warning, and the dozen all seemed to shift forwards around him at it, steel rattling. Tenways showed his rotten teeth. "Fucking make me." "I'll give it a try." A man came strolling out of the dark, just his sharp jaw showing in the shadows of his hood, boots crunching heedless through the corner of the fire and sending a flurry of sparks up around his legs. Very tall, very lean, and he looked like he was carved out of wood. He was chewing meat from a chicken bone in one greasy hand, and in the other, held loose under the crosspiece, he had the biggest sword Beck had ever seen. Shoulder high, maybe, from point to pommel, its sheath scuffed as a beggar's boot, but the wire on its hilt glinting with the colours of the fire-pit. He sucked the last shred of meat off his bone with a noisy slurp, and he poked at all the drawn steel with the pommel of his sword, long grip clattering against all those blades. "Tell me you lot weren't working up to a fight without me. You know how much I love killing folk. I shouldn't, but a man has to stick to what he's good at. So, how's this for a recipe?" He worked the bone around between finger and thumb, then flicked it at Tenways so it bounced off his chainmail coat. "You go back to fucking sheep, and I'll fill the graves." Tenways licked his bloody top lip. "My fight ain't with you, Whirrun." And it all came together. Beck had heard songs enough about Whirrun of Bligh, and even hummed a few himself as he fought his way through the log pile. Cracknut Whirrun. How he'd been given the father of swords, how he'd killed his 5 brothers, how he'd hunted the Shimble wolf in the endless winter of the utmost north, held a pass against the countless Shanker with only 2 boys and a woman for company, bested the sorcerer Darum ap Yaut in a battle of wits, and bound him to a rock for the eagles. How he'd done all the tasks worthy of a hero in the valleys, and so come south to seek his destiny on the battlefield. Songs to make the blood run hot, and cold too. Might be his was the hardest name in the whole north these days, and standing right there in front of Beck, close enough to lay a hand on. Though that probably weren't a good idea. "Your fight ain't with me?" Whirrun glanced about like he was looking for who it might be with. "You sure? Fights are twisty little bastards. You draw steel, it's always hard to say where they'll lead you. You drew on Calder, but when you drew on Calder, you drew on Curnden Craws, and when you drew on Craws, you drew on me, and jolly yon Cumber, and wonderful there, and Flood, though he's gone for a wee, I think, and also this lad here whose name I've forgotten," sticking his thumb over his shoulder at Beck. "You should have seen it coming. No excuse for it. A proper war chief fumbling about in the dark like you've nothing in your head but shit. So my fight ain't with you either, Brodd Tenways. But I'll still kill you if it's called for, and add your name to my songs, and I'll still laugh afterwards. So? So what? So shall I draw? And you'd best keep always before you that if the Father of Swords is drawn, it must be blooded. That's the way it's been since before the old time, and the way it must be still and must always be." They stood there for a moment longer, the lot of 'em, all still, all waiting. Then Tenways' brows drew in, and his lips curled back, and Beck felt the guts dropping out of him, because he could feel what was coming, and "What the fuck?" Another man stalked up into the firelight, eyes slits and teeth bared, head forwards and shoulders up like a fighting dog, no want in it but killing. His scowl was crossed with old scars, one ear missing, and he wore a golden chain, a big jewel alive with orange sparks in the middle. Beck swallowed. Black Dow, no question. Who beat Bethod's men 6 times in the long winter, then burned Kyning to the ground with its people in the houses, who fought the Bloody Nine in the circle and nearly won, was left with his life and bound to serve. Fought alongside him then, and with Rudd Three Trees and Tulduru Thunderhead and Harding Grim, as tough a crew as ever walked the north since the age of heroes, and of which, aside from the Dogman, he was the last drawing breath. Then he betrayed the Bloody Nine and killed him who men said couldn't die, and took Scarling's chair for himself. Black Dow right before him now, protector of the North or stealer of it, depending on who you asked. He'd never dreamed of coming so close to the man. Black Dow looked over at Craw, and he looked an awful long way from happy. Beck weren't sure how that pickaxe of a face ever could. "Ain't you supposed to be keeping the peace, old man?" "That's what I'm doing." Craw's sword was still out, but the point had dropped towards the ground now. Most of 'em had. "Oh, aye. Here's a peaceful fucking picture." Dow swept the lot of 'em with his scowl. "No one draws steel up here without my say-so. Now put 'em away, the lot of you. You're embarrassing yourselves." "Boneless little fucker broke my nose," snarled Tenways. "Spoil your looks, did he?" snapped Dow. "Want me to kiss it better? Let me frame this in terms you fucking half-heads can understand. Anyone still holding a blade by the time I get to 5 is stepping into the circle with me, and I'll do things like I used to 'fore old age softened me up. 1? He didn't even need to get to 2. Craw put up right away, and Tenways just after, and all the rest of that steel was good and hidden almost as swift as it had come to light, leaving the 2 lines of men frowning somewhat sheepishly across the fire at each other. Wonderful whispered in Beck's ear, "Might want to put that away." He realized he still had his steel out, shoved it back so fast he damn near cut his leg. Only Whirrun was left there between the 2 sides, one hand on the hilt of his sword and the other on the scabbard, still ready to draw, and looking at it with the smallest curl of a smile to his mouth. "You know, I'm just a little tempted." "Another time," growled Dow, then threw one arm up.